Our last panelist is Alexis McGill.
Hi. First, I want to update my, just a footnote on my bio. The post-voter die, I started a media marketing practice to target young people of color, and using some of the consumer-based models that we were using during that campaign. The question that has been driving me for the last 5 years is, how do you turn the hip-hop generation into the next NRA? Right? I mean, I think that it's, you know, young people of color that, you know, a subset of the larger progressive movement, even though we've made a lot of progress in connecting to them, they still are probably more elusive than most. They're actively cynical. They have reason to be cynical and to not have faith in a system that's continually failed them through education and through criminal justice system. And so my focus has been, in large part, and through this work, has been trying to figure out, how do you connect to them, how do you make politics relevant, how do you keep them engaged, and how do you find something that's going to be legitimate in terms of their politics and representing them, accountable in terms of making sure that the kinds of things that they support get enacted, or if not challenged, and sustainable. You know, how do you build an infrastructure that can help pull them together? I also think that there's a lot of nostalgia in this generation, particularly around the civil rights movement. And so there's this desire to be involved in collective action and movement building, but it's also such a me generation. It's such a get mine hustle that there's more focus on pursuing individual means of success as opposed to building collaborative models. And there have been few collaborative models for them to build on, and so that's also a particular challenge. But I think even more than that, there's not a lot of trust in people and people in politics. Beyond the cynicism of the system, it's actually the people that try to engage them. There's not a lot of trust to them. This is the most marketed to generation, and so there's probably a lot of cynicism that comes from that as well. The hip hop industry gets it, obviously. It's no accident that this industry has been alive and relevant for over 25 years. They have built an infrastructure around keeping their ear to the ground and staying engaged, figuring out, you know, what's hot, why, how to drive messages, how to drive buzz. And I think, you know, it's almost $1 trillion industry, and so, you know, that the sustainability, I'm sure, is they're going to keep investing in that. One of the things that we tried to do with the Voter Die campaign and with, you know, with work at the Hip Hop Summit Action Network was try to identify those consumer-based networks that turn out millions of young people, well, it used to be the case, probably not as much the same, to buy a record every Tuesday when an album drops. You know, how do you take that excitement around a Jay-Z album dropping and turn it into people voting an election on any given Tuesday? The way that you create that buzz is by tapping into local influencers in the community, and I've heard a bit on the panel about this. You know, you identify the local barbers, the DJs, the program directors, anyone who has a natural constituency, who is a trusted person within a community, and you engage them around messaging. And that's in large part the kind of work that I'm engaged in now, going city by city and focusing some of those groups to some of those people to think about their kind of collective power around messaging and how they can coordinate message and how they can actually, on a local level, drive more of the conversation around politics. They all want to be engaged, and they all believe that it's right to be engaged, but many of them haven't even, you know, had any kind of civic engagement lessons since, you know, Schoolhouse Rock. And so, you know, so trying to, you know, ask them to leverage their credibility and their platform to talk about politics is a challenge, unless you can provide an education support system and provide an infrastructure to help them build that out. The reason why influencers obviously work, I think, primarily because they're peer-to-peer. I think secondarily, it's because they meet people where they are. I think there used to be a lot of arrogance around organizing young people, expecting them to come to meetings, you know, at a given time to show their interest and get them engaged. And I think the idea that you can go into a beauty shop and find people having, conversations that are political in nature, and help organize them around, help them find vehicles to work through, means that the organizers have to do more work identifying those spaces in the community, and I think that's critical. I think that all of this work should serve the grassroots. All the media work that we've been doing should serve these kinds of grassroots efforts. The things that I think are missing in the progressive movement, particularly as they relate to young people, I think with this blogosphere, my introduction to the blogosphere actually came during the Ned Lamont for Senate race, where I ran the urban program, and I realized how important it was for the influencers that I was working with. Like I broke Ned on the streets. I took him to barbershops and had him talking to people while they were getting their hair cut, and that kind of connection, I think, would have been even more amplified if those same people were going home and checking out what was happening in various blogs, or getting it on their Blackberries and so forth. And so I think there's an opportunity to expand the reach of the kind of collective climate conversation that the blogosphere is generating into communities, particularly communities of color that are not now connected. I think we're also missing, there's a lot of focus in this conversation as well around electoral politics. I think that for young people and young people of color, there's not a good infrastructure for social justice work that's ongoing that can help create an accountability agenda for young people to continually engage in issues, and again, understand the mechanisms of not just voting people into office, but keeping them accountable once they're there, so they don't fall back into active cynicism. And then I think the last thing that the progressive youth movement is missing at this moment, and I kind of look around the room and I think what my friends of color say all the time, which is, when did the progressive movement become so white? And I think that's my part of my answer to that is that the progressive movement used to be, the issues of the progressive movement used to be the domain primarily of people of color. And now the mass majority of Americans are experiencing that, and there's more progressive movement building around that. But at the same time, when we're talking about trying to create networks that are developed around trust and so forth, visibility really does, visibility of people of color will bring people of color into a space. And so I think that's something that overall I think the progressive movement has to focus on.
Great, thanks.